Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Our guest today is a leading expert in clinical psychology, along with emotional intelligence. With more than 15,000 hours of practical experience in the field, she has influenced thousands of lives, and through wisdom of science, Eastern philosophy, and Western psychology. And today she's going to show you how to use affirmations and teach you the right things to say to yourself. Please put your hands together and welcome to the Mental Detox podcast, our good friend Ying.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Morning.
Wow, is this background painted or is that the real thing?
Is it real? Have a look. The bird is moving.
Oh my gosh.
It's getting dark though.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Now you've done a lot in a short period of time. You're beautiful. How Young. You've been a fashion model. You're a registered nurse.
Yep.
You're a psychiatric clinician, and you've got more than 15,000 hours of practical experience in the field. So how have you used this knowledge and this experience to improve your own life?
I think my life is quite a simple, just minimalism. Like I feel like you can make all the money in the world with all different ways, but I don't need much. I think I still eating the same breakfast I ate 10, 15 years ago. And I think the less is more. That's how I feel. You live a minimum life. That's how I feel it, because I think when I was really young, I had so many handbags, so many pair of shoes, so many clothes, and each year I donated 20 bags of clothes to Salvation Army, and have all these things. I realized that actually they didn't give me freedom. I found I was like a dragged me instead of liberating me. So then I realized actually it's more about what it will give to other people, make other people how they feel, instead of how much we actually earn and possess. If that makes sense, I feel.
Well, if you need a place to send the handbags once you've finished with the Gucci and the Chanel and the Louis Vuitton, just send them to me. That's okay. I will be happy to take them off your hands. Now you're a registered nurse. How many years have you trained for? And then you've also moved into being a psychiatric clinician.
Yeah.
So started with nursing and then psychiatric. What was the transition? What took place?
I feel like because I was very lazy in the medical surgical ward, and in the medical surgery ward, you're going to look after a lot of the patients. And I was talking to one or two patients in the whole morning, trying to getting to know how they feel, their thoughts, instead of their stitches or wounds. I feel like emotional wounds sometimes it's invisible, but actually it's we more need to heal the invisible wound rather than the physical wound. That's why people might label me as lazy or neglecting my job. But then when I did my psychiatric degree, all my degree was a high distinction. Then I realized, okay, maybe something that my passion shows through my physical evidence. Your evidence normally is louder than what you actually say to other people. So then I move on to the psychiatric part of the field.
And what was the transition for you emotionally? Once you started to follow that passion, what happened in your life?
I think in my life was like a two turning points for me to change. The first is like you have seen so many people suffered from emotional trauma, or from self-sabotaging from mental health. That was the first turning point, that you see that every single day. The second turning point would be my mother got domestic violence abuse by her second husband, and she was screaming to me in China, but I didn't pick up the sign, and I was neglected. And then I realized that I'm not just come from a professional field. I also come from a victim perspective as well. And to have a turning point in my life to say, okay, this is real, because my mother lost her life through mental trauma. And I thought that's something would make a huge impact on my own life and my family's life as well. And another story was one of my colleagues, and she was a clinical psychologist, and she also suffered from depression and anxiety. And that's also another turning point to say, okay, what's the limitation of Western psychology or clinical psychology? There is many things out there. Would it be Eastern philosophy? Would it be NLP? Would it be many other healing modalities also play a healing parts rather than just the clinical psychology? They got me to really start questioning death or life, and academic smart or emotionally intelligent.
And through this journey, what have you learned about people? And people tend to say some very nasty things to themselves. As individuals, we say things to ourselves that we would never dare to say to other people. In your experience, what are some of these nasty things that people say to themselves? How do they talk to themselves? What does that voice say in the head?
It's quite interesting because one of the work I do with my clients, they fill in an assessment form, and I get one form one day. The clients write it down. I said, "What's your favorite quote?" So the first client, she write it down. "You are not your thoughts." And then I thought, okay, that's a fair form. And then some days later, I got another form. The form said, your thoughts become your emotion become your behavior, your behavior become your reality. You are your thoughts. So then you can kind of like having these two forms, one form saying you are your thoughts and one form saying you are not your thoughts. So what do you think, Daniel? Like, when people say you are your thoughts and you are not your thoughts, you have like completely two different forms.
Well, the first one here is my mental equivalence here is if somebody writes down, you are not your thoughts, I'm thinking that whatever they're saying to themselves, they don't want to be true.
Right.
First one. And then the other one I also agree with, because your thoughts produce 95% of your feelings. Your feelings determine the actions you do and don't take. And those actions determine your outcome. So on the other hand, are your thoughts. So it's two totally different understandings. I love it, but it's also quite scary at the same time.
It's quite scary. You are actually your thoughts and you are actually not your thoughts. It depends on the content of the thoughts.
Yeah, very interesting.
I know I say things to myself that I wish came true. And
so you are your thoughts.
Absolutely. Then the other things I just say to myself, I think you better go for a walk today. Cool off for a little bit.
Yeah, that's why, sometimes I feel like, it's not a good thoughts or bad thoughts. We don't want to label them, but we just wanted to see which one is actually useful and serving you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Eastern philosophy, we talk about yin and yang, which is, the good is the bad, and the bad is the good. So some thoughts I thought is bad actually is not that bad, but some thoughts good actually might not be good. So sometimes I ask you, what's the thoughts actually serve you to get your results?
And interesting thoughts as well as the emotional intensity behind it. And you can have a passing thought, but no emotion. But soon as you start to emotionalize it, and really put a lot of energy into it, I believe that's when it can become very dangerous, especially if it's a self-limiting belief. And then it ends up in self-sabotage. So for these people who are talking to themselves negatively, people who don't have a good internal dialogue, what recommendations can you make? And what things could they say to themselves so they can stop self-sabotage?
I think for myself that I used to have an affirmation, and I put an affirmation on my shower screen.
Yep.
And I put affirmation on the fridge that even my mind didn't believe all these positive affirmation, that I just repeating until your body started to really, your body, your cells, you have a physical reaction and you started to believe it. I think that's one work for me. I'll give you a really tangible story of myself. When I was young, like my grandmother, she was Japanese. So she used to give us a tiny food, like a tiny sauce sushi or tiny fish. And I was 12, so I was a teenager, like I need lots of food. And then if you ask a food from her, she will label you as a fat or eating too much, and I feel guilty. But I was so hungry. So I started taking money from her pocket without telling her. And I said, I need to go out. Then I went out to buy 3 pork buns. And then, so for many years that I had this shame and a guilt, think, you know, I'm a thief, that I stealing somebody's money. But then when I grew up, I realized that I was basically just hungry, and my family didn't give me enough food. And so I had many years that are self-sabotaging, and to say, you know, I'm not good enough, I'm a bad person, why did I stealing money from my grandparents? And then I just realized I was just hungry. I shouldn't label myself as good or bad. So
I love that story. What about some of the things that you say to yourself? Husband, leave me alone. Husband, stop harassing me.
Oh, great question. I'm too cute. But when you mentioned about that, you know, about the thoughts, you know, we always say to our clients that you become what you think about most of the time, which is really important when you mention about, you know, those positive self-talk, you know, to ourselves. And then that's something that we really have to put as a habit, you know, to do it every 100%.
We even go to the extent to use affirmations with our children.
Yes.
And one of the best ones that we find is I like myself. So what I do with my daughter, who's now 7, I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now. I'll tickle her, I'll get her laughing. And then I say, Daddy's not going to stop tickling until you say, I like myself.
Yeah.
So she repeats, I like myself while she's laughing. So she's emotionalizing it. She's saying, I like myself. And this serves to build up the self-esteem. It builds up worth. And even today at 7, I'll give her a little tickle and she'll say, Daddy, I like myself.
Yeah, it's like an anchor. Yeah, it's just like an anchor.
It's a great anchor. So from a young age.
I tell you a story of my daughter, because when she was 3 or 4, she started to recognize the words. So I made a canvas on her wall, like a feature wall. So the word writes, yes, I can, because many times she says, no, I can't, no, I can't. Then I made a Canva. It was like, I think it was about $200. And I made a Canva, and the Canva said, yes, I can. So every time she walked into her bedroom, she looked at the Canva. She said, yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yeah. It's become her slogan.
That's beautiful.
That was very good.
Australia's #1 mum, Dimmy.
Dimmy.
Now, there's a lot of people who need to learn how to talk to themselves more effectively. Where's the best place they can follow you? And do you have a website that they can go to now to learn more about your work that you're doing there in beautiful Sydney?
They can connect on Facebook, you know, Instagram, LinkedIn. There is many other ways. WeChat, there is emails, or our website is westsquare.com, like very simple that you can just connect with us. So yeah, and I'm very grateful to connect with you guys too.
It's always a pleasure to meet somebody who's a topic expert and somebody who's actually applied these techniques in their own life. And that's where I judge things. If somebody teaches me something and they're using it in their own life and they get the results, they are my authority and they're my expert, and we see you doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you follow Ying Yang. Make sure you head to y2academy.com and do it now, and enjoy your weekend. Thank you, Ying.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy from Australia. Hello from Australia.
Yes, Ajian. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's the only Chinese I know.